And I think, and maybe this is pure speculation, the plan might not have been for secrecy forever. I don't really know what the original motivations might be. They might have just been, we need to review this in a couple of years and decide our plan. Right now, we're just going to keep this very quiet. So you start something like MJ-12, as it's often been called. I think that's probably the logical thing you would have done. But the problem with any secret, of course, is that it develops its own momentum and its own profitability. And this is exactly, I think, what happened. So what happens with all of this? Well, I think once you've got the secret, it becomes inevitable that it goes private, as I like to say. So in other words, you know, I've got this little alien artifact. And let's say I'm the Army. Okay, so, well, sure, there are scientists working directly in the U.S. Army, and some of them are very, very brilliant. But really, if I want to do this right, I'm going to take this to General Electric or Lockheed or Boeing, because they have the R&D, they've got the scientists. I mean, they make stuff for me. That's their job. They're the best people at it. So at a certain point, this exotic technology will go in very, very compartmented ways to the various places where it needs to be studied. Maybe, if you get lucky, to replicate it, but more realistically, just to study it and find out what you can learn from it. And then, of course, it's a great little gig because when you retire from your position in the military, you go work for them as a senior vice president and make a fortune on all kinds of ground floor investment opportunities. But what it does is, to some extent, it means giving up some level of ownership, so to speak, of this exotic technology to the corporations. It makes perfect sense, okay? Particularly when your own government is dominated by those corporations. Particularly when all of the United States government was literally dominated by members of the Council on Foreign Relations, which was and is a tool explicitly of industry and finance particularly, to set U.S. policy since, you know, the immediate aftermath of the First World War. Of course they're going to want to do that. And it helps with the secrecy, because once it's outside of the formal government system, then, you know, government people can genuinely say, well, it's not part of, you know, I have nothing to do with this. None of our agencies have anything to do with this. And that would be true to a large extent. As I interjected earlier today, as Richard Helms, the CIA director, once said, the first rule in keeping secrets is nothing on paper. You keep things out of the formal system. It's done all the time. We have a great series of statements, actually, by a former U.S. senator and a one-time presidential candidate. He was nominated by the Republican Party in 1964 for president. He lost to LBJ, Johnson. Barry Goldwater, who had a strong interest in this topic, was a very close friend of U.S. Air Force legend Curtis LeMay, and spoke on several occasions about how he was rebuffed in his attempts to gain access to the legendary Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where it was said many, many times alien bodies were stored there. And Goldwater, in 1981, wrote a letter to a constituent, just said, this thing has gotten so highly classified, it's just impossible to get anything on it. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, has spoken about this many, many times. Actually, starting 1997. You know, recently Mitchell finally, very belatedly, got some press last summer on his statements about this. Actually, though, started making statements in 1997, as far as I can trace, talking about we're looking at likely reverse-engineered technology in the hands of humans that are not under government control or any type of high-level control. Keeping in mind that if you're Edgar Mitchell, in fact, whether you even believe that he went to the moon or not, that's almost irrelevant, because as an official moonwalking astronaut, really, who's not going to want to be your friend? Edgar Mitchell knows everyone that he needs to know in top levels of the national security community, some very, very high-level people indeed, who have spoken to him privately, and he's mentioned this to me and publicly, that there are groups that have in their possession alien technology and bodies. Now, even whether he's right or wrong is I mean, that's important, but really, I've just wondered for years, where the hell has been the mainstream media? You've got this Apollo astronaut who's not senile, who has a PhD, very sharp guy, very nice guy. No one would listen to him. He finally got some press last summer, and then, of course, it just went into the black hole, as it always does, and gets forgotten. One of Mitchell's insights that he gained from his sources was that this whole thing has gone out of, it's in the hands of rogue groups. It's not under formal government control. And look, forget UFOs. Look at any other aspect of government, and we can all see it. I mean, we've gone through a kind of silent revolution in the last 2 decades. It's a transnational revolution. Looking at, in the U.S., the battle over NAFTA in 1992-93, World Bank, IMF, things that have happened to facilitate the death of nations, which is really the era that we're living in. Who's in charge? Who's in charge? Is it the nation anymore? Is it the people? Are the people sovereign of their nations? Really? Well, it's a great idea, and I'll believe that idea till the day I die, but is that really what's going on? Anyway, the UFO, the secrecy fits that whole pattern of the privatization of power. So now let's, again, pretend again that we've got this alien artifact and we're studying it. So now how do you pay for the research? How do you really do all it? Well, you've got to have secret money. I'm now convinced that the UFO secret is one of the foundational elements of the so-called black budget. I think that it's instrumental. I mean, I really wasn't in this place a number of years ago. It took time for me to kind of figure this out. But I think the UFO secret isn't the only foundation of the black budget, but I think it's really one of the linchpins of it. Because it's a secret that was so big and is so big, to fund it is a lot of money. If you want to create, let's say, secure underground facilities, all right? If you want to create the kind of security necessary to keep this. And by security, I don't mean just guys with guns, but I mean management of the press, management of the academic community. And don't think it doesn't happen, all right? There's some very good work, public mainstream work done on, for example, the CIA's manipulation of the American academic community. It's a very good book called Cloak and Dagger by a fellow named Robin Winks, all about the CIA and Yale University, which in fact is I was mentioning to Ian, that's where Skull and Bones is based out of, Yale, not Harvard, but nonetheless. Harvard is also a CIA, place, obviously. But in this particular study, Winks shows slam dunk, absolutely clear-cut case of how the CIA manages Yale. And they do it with so many schools. And so, for like Harvard, for many years, was the place of Donald Menzel, the longtime UFO debunker, the most prominent debunker in the world during the 50s and 60s. Menzel was the chief astronomer at Harvard. Well, it was only after his death that we learned Menzel was at this level with the NSA and U.S. intelligence in general. Menzel was plugged into the max, okay? So here's the function that the intelligence community fulfills within academia. You bring in the key players, and they manage the choke points. So when some little rinky-dink professor at some little community college wants to get, off on how the UFO conspiracy is so bad, then you get some big shot like Menzel to slap him down. That's how the whole system works. They don't really care what the little guys say. It's because they can be managed. And it's the same with the media. During 1975, in the United States, there was an incredible wave of dramatic, scary, amazing airspace violations along the whole U.S. northern border and into Canada. It got local media coverage, didn't get a speck of national coverage. And that's because the story was choked off at the level of Reuters and Associated Press. It never made it. Got tremendous local coverage where it died. So you control the nodes, and you can control the whole big picture. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting a little digressing here. Paying for the research means to fund it is expensive. And so you've got to get the money from sources that are not necessarily open. So part of it can be in classified expenditures through Congress or undoubtedly through Parliament. But a lot of it, let's face it, isn't it much nicer to have unvouchered money that you don't have to explain to for people? Hence the importance of narcotics trafficking. All right, and if you've done any tiny bit of research on the CIA, then you know that the agency has had a long-standing, up to their eyeballs involvement in narco trafficking. And it's not just the CIA. You know, any intelligence agency that wants to raise secret armies, rig elections, do all kinds of things that they're not supposed to do means they need a lot of money. And so they'll deal with, I mean, drug trafficking is, I don't know, it's in the top 5 industries in the world. I mean, you got right up there with oil and cars and weapons and drugs, except that it's illegal. But don't think for an instant that just because it's illegal that no one wants that money. Everyone wants that money. So, in other words, however you fund this program, it involves a subversion of the formal political system. There's no way around it.